Whoops, there goes my anime audience. Don't worry, I'm reviewing Shigatsu wa Kimi no Uso next week. Please don't leave me. It's my understanding that being a game developer isn't easy. It's an exceptionally risk-averse medium lately. Innovation is drying up in the AAA, gameplay trailers getting less and less representative of the final product, publishers don't know how to manage and schedule. In layman's terms, I used to think Assassin's Creed was a good franchise. Game development has been getting very interesting lately, and often I think, I could do better than that. Well, alright, that was a lie, I don't think that. That's fairly naive, not to mention insulting, but I do know that somebody has, because GameDev Tycoon exists, but of course someone else had the same thought 15 years earlier, and therein lies my main problem with GameDev Tycoon. I am not going to beat around the bush here. This game is a bit of an oddity, and leaves me both slightly frustrated, confused, and intrigued. I have no right to be, of course. It's not my product. I've been open quote inspired by close quote, nor do I lose any money over this. I think it's more the principle of it. It doesn't upset me because it's a factually incorrect representation of the birth and subsequent growth of the video game industry, not because it's a gross oversimplification, and not because it's not fun. It is in fact none of those things. It's actually pretty accurate. Complexity is an acceptable sacrifice in service of fun, and fun it absolutely is. However, this is all fun I've had before. I know this Charleston. To in some way exonerate myself from the proceeding, it's pertinent to announce that I in absolutely no way want this to come across as bashing the developers of GameDev Tycoon. Greenheart Games clearly put a lot of work into this, and it's a fine product. I certainly don't profess to knowing the details behind the game's production, if they acquired some kind of legal permission to make this or what have you, but GameDev Tycoon is, and I want to state this as clearly as possible, an abject copy of Kairosoft's 1997 Japan-only release, Game Dev Story, re-released in Western markets on iOS and Android in 2010. The developers, to my knowledge, have claimed that the game was inspired by it. That said, I feel like saying it was only inspired is a rather significant understatement, as though one might say they made a book inspired by Moby Dick, called Moby Prick, starring Captain Rahab, Bishmel, and Pete's Coffee and Tea. The gameplay is the same, the progression is the same, hell, the title is the same, just with a slight twist to in some way vaguely differentiate it from its forebears. This is a Transmorphers level of counterfeit we're working with here. Now hold on there, Aaox, you might say. You're not blazing a radical new path here. You are not the Columbus of the digital age, and I'm aware of that. This isn't exactly a revelatory accusation. It's been levied before by critics far more accomplished than I across many different games. There's nothing new under the sun. After all, one might argue that the fruitfulness of this endeavour is undercut by that, if indeed this were an endeavour that might bear fruit in the first place, but I've done more stupid things in the past, and if my forthcoming Monster Girl quest review sitting on the horizon like a tsunami building in force and power until it destroys everything I've worked to build is any indication, I'm not done doing stupid things yet. So let's go for it. Now, perhaps this is all a bit intense and unwarranted. Perhaps the fine gentlemen at Greenheart thought their pursuit was in the same ballpark as Terraria's pastiche of Minecraft, and legitimately thought their product was distance enough from the source material that it wasn't an infringement. And to give credit where credit is due, in some cases that very much is the case. I really do want to give them the benefit of the doubt here, but the sad truth is that I'm willing to bet everything I say about GameDev Tycoon can be applied to GameDev Story, and vice versa. They are very similar games. They are almost the same game. But the real killing blow, the one that really drives my argument here, is that in a lot of ways I think Game Dev Story is the better game. And Game Dev Story came out in 1997, cost significantly less, and was re-released globally in 2010 on mobile platforms. You thought Aaox was all anime girls and quirky English charm? Not this week. Oh no, this is hard-hitting internet pseudo-journalism, ladies and gentlemen. I even did research for this one. But enough preamble. Let's get into the heart of the matter. Truth be told, I'm not quite sure how to go about reviewing this in light of its similarities to Game Dev Story, but I do know that my intention is absolutely not to be the apoplectic video game Poindexter. That's not me. That's not my shtick. I'm not mad at these guys. I ain't even salty. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to write the rest of this review in straight-edge fashion as per the norm, ignoring the fact that Game Dev Story exists like an alcoholic refusing to admit that they have a problem. So, Game Dev Tycoon by Greenheart Games. What a strikingly original concept. It's like Zoo Tycoon or Roller Coaster Tycoon, but for video games. Wow. And I haven't even heard of a company called Kairosoft based in Nishi Shinjuku, Tokyo, instead of Cairo, Egypt, as the name might make one believe. Developers of fun mobile games like Hot Spring Story, World Cruise Story, and There was another one, I'm sure of it. Oh well, I'm sure it'll come back to me eventually. GameDev Tycoon is an interesting product. As previously stated, it's the first game by indie studio Greenheart Games released through Steam Greenlight, and is yet another contender, alongside Minecraft and Prison Architect, for the coveted game that was released early access yet got undue praise and popularity thanks to YouTubers playing it before its official launch award. As such, despite its fairly average aggregate of 68 on Metacritic, it's received an overwhelmingly positive Steam review aggregate with 98% positive reviews. That 30% increase means that by releasing this video I'm probably going to be exposed to no end of vitriol, especially given my opening platform. Unfortunately, whatever critical integrity I have left will not allow me to simply dismiss that nonsense as mere coincidence. This game is inspired heavily, crushingly heavily, we're talking like Atlas-style heft here, and that is a reference to Greek mythology, not the fatless stereotype, by a game that probably doesn't exist and isn't called Game Dev Story. In GDT, you play as a one-person garage developer studio during the birth of the video game industry through current gen, developing video games for the new platforms as they're released, starting out as a PC or Commodore 64 developer and branching out into the NES, then the Master System, then onwards and upwards until we reach the dizzying heights of the industry we know today, subtle sarcastic air quotes. The game is relatively accurate to the release of the consoles, and as such provides a fairly decent crash course in the history of the industry, albeit with some interesting, often hackneyed console names, ostensibly to avoid copyright infringement, and goodness knows we wouldn't want to copy someone else's intellectual property. That would be absolutely terrible. Playing the game is fairly straightforward. To make a game, one selects the platform they intend to produce it for after first buying a contract that allows them to develop for that platform. Then they select a name, a setting or theme, then a genre, and finally an engine. One can develop their own engines, and that's pretty critical to succeeding. Just like with the games, you can name the engine whatever you want, so, let me know how Dick Butt Tech 2.0 is working out. Ultimately though, progression is not complex. The math is hidden under the hood behind menus and simplified numbers, which makes it difficult at times to understand quite why your romance puzzle game isn't rocketing through the charts. There is little discernible difference between a 20 and a 15 in technology and design, the 2 meters that fill exponentially as your game is developed, and how they impact your final review scores. And of course, game development is a pretty big part of Tycoon, as unexpected and bewildering a thing that is to suggest. Your office runs on the funds that you make through the game sales, and producing games gives you research points that can be used to research advances in the field, like cutscenes, stereo sound, or anime goals. Thanks to this system, one can be very interesting and release lots of cutting-edge new games, and remain entirely relevant and important in the ever-changing face of the video game industry, just like industry giants Ubisoft and Rare. My word, I'm just tearing everyone apart today, aren't I? This is probably my favourite thing about Game Story Tycoon. You're basically riding the industry's highs and lows, and the knowledge of the inner workings of the game industry is a hugely beneficial thing for knowing what systems to cash in on and what systems to bail out of, or just opt to not develop on altogether. For example, it might not be a great thing to invest all your money into making games for the Dreamcast, but you're playing a pretty safe game by developing for the NES. Of course, these aren't minute details, and the game is missing a lot of information, but if you want a crash course in how the industry grew from the C64 onwards, this is a great example. And when you hit 1997, if you release a game called Game Dev Story for the PC, the time paradox failstate from Metal Gear Solid 3 shows up, and then Greenheart Games slips you a few bucks to keep things on the down low, lest peeps start getting deep sixth, if you get their meaning. Now, I'm being overly harsh here. Of course I am, as the crux of this review, but the nature of the more modern release of Game Dev Tycoon does allow it some not insignificant advantages over Game Dev Story. It's got a better designed, less intrusive interface, even if I prefer the 16-bit aesthetic of Game Dev Story to Game Dev Tycoon's animated models. Obviously that's a matter of personal preference, and not something I'm going to dock my opinion of Tycoon on. Additionally, one of the benefits of being released as a Steamworks integrated release is that it's got a lively modding community which can extend replayability and add to the experience, and that's probably the biggest advantage Game Dev Tycoon has over Game Dev Story, a game that, I hasten to remind you, does not exist. So the game's solid. It's not terrible. It's based off a great game, and I do very much enjoy it. If you can't get Game Dev Story, or if you prefer the aesthetic of Game Dev Tycoon, whatever your poison, please remember that all games are fallible, this one especially so. Nothing's perfect, but nothing's original, and Game Dev Story has rather mountainous piles of flaws itself. And of course, it's possible that Greenheart had no idea about GDS, and the game just happens to be entirely similar. Unlikely, but not impossible. Ron Gilbert, creator of Monkey Island, told Wired in in an interview that he was a self-proclaimed addict to game dev story. During the interview, he made specific mention of the review system within the game, and when prompted to give a response regarding the subject of aggregation, he says, "I read the good ones and forget that the bad ones happened. But when you've a 98% positive rating on Steam, when people flock to your game without regard for pomp, circumstance, or indeed flagrant theft, then aggregation may not mean as much as one might like to think it does." The major criticism levied by actual game journalists about GameDev Tycoon is its striking similarity to Game Dev Story, hence the mediocre Metacritic aggregate. But when there's no bad press, when the original is buried because of sheer driving force of a positive reinforcement loop, when there are no negative reviews, we run a legitimate risk of forgetting the sources, and with the recent struggles with game history being copyrighted and therefore hacking, it would be tragically ironic for us to forget Game Dev Story. Goes up and the green oh no, this is the sentence of this review, isn't it? Crowning achievements of the industry we know today, subtle sarcastica quizza. Little Italian inflection there. Start getting deep sixth, if you know them, if you know what I mean. Oh yes. Okay, somebody give me a pulse, please. It's got a better designed, less intrusive interface. Petition to start pronouncing interface as interface. It's not my product, they've been open. I certainly don't profess to knowing what the I'm aware of that. This isn't exactly irrelevant because of sheer driving force of a force. Damn it. Force. Pause foul. Got undue praise and unpopularity. Oh no. This happens a lot. Ron Gilbert. Let's try this. Ron Gilbert, creator of Monkey Island, told Wired in an interview that he was a self-proclaimed addict to game. My mouth is just like gluing together at this point. By indie studio Green Heart Games, released through Streets. Oh my god! And of course, it's possible that Green. Oh, what happened there? Ron Gilbert. Oh, that's better. If you can't get Game Dev Story, or if you prefer the aesthetic, of Game Dev Tycoon, whatever your poison, please remember that all games are fallible, and this one especially so. Nothing's perfect, but nothing's original, and Game Dev Story has a rather mountainous pilot. I feel like people keep trying to open the door. I feel like people might have come back without me noticing. Yeah, that's a good thing I was doing my wonderful Irish accent. Mediocre memes. Me.